Hey there, all you creepers and reapers. Welcome to another episode of the Femme Fatalities. I'm your co-hostess, Anna, and I'm here with...
Hey, Grieflings and Frightlings, it's Margaret, and Anna and I have a fun cast for you, an interesting cast. I don't have any clever segues into this one, so Anna, what movie are we talking about today?
Well, Margaret, I think you would agree that it's so much fun. It's out of this world. Yes, we're talking about Romulus today, and we have a lot to say. So grab yourself a cup of bruja brew and some coffin cookies, settle up next to your comfy little couch, and get ready for this one. If you haven't seen all of the Alien movies, don't worry, you don't need to. We will give you our thoughts, and we also have another podcast, link below, that talks about the other Alien films. So, without further ado, Margaret, what do you think?
Yes, first of all, trigger warnings. Aliens, Romulus, heavy sexual themes. So if that bothers you, do not watch Romulus. There's death. There's like, in a way, it feels like imprisonment, right? In the beginning, the characters are forced into labor that they can't get out of. There is also conflict between droid and human. What
Yeah,
else, Anna?
I agree. A lot of AI issues. Um, like you said, the behaviors of the aliens, very, very graphic. Um, the other thing too, a lot of Madonna complex as well throughout the film. So definitely be mindful of that. I don't think the kills were really that gory. To me they didn't compare to the original Alien. Um, so I would say there's definitely some blood and gore, but average. Five five tombstones out of 10 in the graveyard.
Yes, it wasn't nothing spectacular, nothing that I'm like, ooh, I'm really going to remember that. That was really creative, like Anna was saying. And feels like Anna really caught on to the Madonna complex and issues that were present. I really got sucked into, and listeners, you'll probably guess as listening to our cast where Anna and I might kind of go into a movie, was what makes somebody human. I feel like the original Blade Runner and now this
Yeah.
one brought that up with the droid who seems so childlike and innocent, and you just really like him. You want him to be okay. And then what happens when he's influenced
Yeah.
by the other droid, and almost like AI can be corrupted message, humans can be corrupted
Yeah.
too. So go back, listen to me and Anna's podcast on Blade Runner, because I feel like we really dive into this topic of what makes somebody or something human. What did
Absolutely.
you think, Anna?
Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that you bring up humans can be influenced and corrupted too, because that changes your way of thinking. It changes your goals too. And, our droid, who I found very endearing throughout the beginning of the film as well, it shows that once you change the environment and what's being fed in to his file database completely changes his mindset and his programming, right? And how many of us have had environmental changes and it impacts our programming as humans. So,
Code switching.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is, hey, sometimes if you don't react and you're in a perilous situation, you may hear comments like, "Are you a robot? Like, what's wrong with you? Why aren't you doing this or that? Why aren't you showing emotion?" You're just going through your own journey. So if it's grief, loss, change, whatever, just because you're not reactive doesn't mean internally you're not being proactive and processing in a way that is best and healthiest for you. So really, anytime you're going through any sort of change or loss or any sort of journey, keep in mind that if you're doing what is healthy for you and processing it in a way that is comfortable for you, not harmful to yourself or others, no one can tell you to do it differently. No one reserves the right to tell you how to grieve, how to change, how to process life and all of its nuances. That is up to you. As long as you are doing it in a healthy, comfortable way, that's the most important thing.
I love that you just jumped right in there into grief and how we process, and
Mhm.
even looking at the droid before he is compromised by a new environment and a new information, the grief on his face when he learns that Rain is going to leave him and she's
Yes.
basically sacrificing
Mhm.
him, that was grief. And how often in life people assume that we're not grieving, that we don't feel, that it's
Mhm.
not important to us. I'm guessing Rain couldn't face her own grief because of peer pressure that, well, he's just a droid, he doesn't feel, it's okay to sacrifice him, which is still weird because the whole movie, she basically protects him, even
Yeah.
from the one guy's grief whose mom died because a droid
Mhm.
decided to seal the mine. So they work on this planet with no sun and they're miners. And so he wants to, which happens in grief too.
Mhm.
You are now an outward symbol of my grief. My mom died because of somebody like you. Now I'm going to want to go after you. And how much she protected him, only to be like, okay, yeah, we can
Mhm.
sacrifice him so I can go live my dream.
Right. Yeah. And I just think the aliens themselves, they're on this ship that was going to be a research ship to create something to promote longevity for humans. So the other kind of aspect of that was all of this experimenting, what was going on in the lab, um, misinformation. I think that touched on a lot of fears that people have, especially now having gone through a pandemic in our lives, the information that's being reported versus what's recorded and those sorts of things. And, um, that not to kind of scuttle back to the triggers, but definitely that could potentially be a trigger for someone as well. But I really did like that this is an experiment ship. Like, we know that they're doing lab research. We know that these things are going on. The aliens didn't just like come in and say, hey, I'm here to eat you. This was very intentional. They harvested them, and this is what's happened. Um, at the end of the day, I do have a weird level of empathy for the alien queen. I think we've talked about this before. She's just a mom trying to take care of her kids. And, the Madonna complex with humans versus the aliens. But the little chest bursters, as we'll call them, and the face huggers, you know what my thoughts are already. So I'm going to ask you first, Margaret. What is your feedback in relation to that?
Into the mama queen just protecting her babies.
Hmm.
I think it's that like very maternal instinct that parents have. How do they protect their babies? I didn't see her as prevalent in this one as
Hmm.
like the original Alien. I feel like
Yeah.
almost like the babies were like out there, like, we're gonna go do
Mhm.
our thing, we're gonna like conquer all of you. Tell me more about your thoughts, Anna, because I feel like you
Yeah.
have dived more deeply into this
Yeah.
than I have.
So I feel like, okay, a few alien movies back, we discovered that they had one of the alien queens like chained up and they were using her basically to like weaponize her. So I'm like, well, what if this is like a continuum of that, and then the alien queen that we encounter, and then the adult aliens are all descendants of that one. So that's kind of where my thinking was. And I'm like, at the end of the day, she's just trying to protect her offspring, right? That is the main purpose of any species, is to sustain itself. Um, so from that perspective, right, we as humans, connect with the human characters and even on some level the droids that look human, but we never really have a perspective of the aliens. So I do think that that's something that was on my mind watching the movie. Just like, well, you've been captured, you're being kept in a lab, you're being experimented on, and so are your offspring. Like, that kind of sucks.
I love that you touch into, for the alien that like we're seen as the enemy, that generational, that
Mm-hmm.
historical trauma that now her offspring are gonna want to kill humans because humans have killed their mom, they have, or their grandma, whoever, they have been tortured, right? It's like that experiment where mice were shocked when I think they
Yeah.
ate a certain food, and then later generations of mice had an aversion to
Yeah.
that food. And so seeing like, yeah, these babies are like, you are the enemy. I don't know why you're the enemy. You are the enemy.
Absolutely. Yeah. And then the other portion, of course, of the chest bursters and the face huggers, the phallic references could not have been any more obvious in this movie. Also, the fact that we have this pregnant person, she takes this magical serum from the aliens, gives birth, dies, and then this like bizarre creature, which I have my own thoughts on, that comes out, right? And the creature evidently is like a eunuch. I'm like, there is so much emphasis on human sexuality in this film that it's ridiculous. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. It drives home my theory that the entire series is based on the masculine facing fear of the body of the feminine facing character.
Yes. And that fear even into like how the women are violated. Like the first one that gets the hip hugger, I was like, really? And I
Mm-hmm.
think they do this in past ones. Why does it have to impregnate her through the mouth? Like
Mm-hmm.
it could, there are other movies, they're like, okay, like you just swallow the alien. I mean, I know that's oral, but it's not this gross like penis, extra long penis that's like going through
Right.
somebody. I was like, this is like, and then it like takes over her whole face so she can't breathe. Like I was like, that
Mm-hmm.
is so, the sexual
Yeah.
undertones are there. And like you said, then about like the baby, and even that fear, like the birth was bloody,
Mm-hmm.
and then some weird thing where she was like wanting the baby, not wanting the baby, and then
Mm-hmm.
ultimately killed by her baby. But the baby
Mm-hmm.
was like, what, 5 times bigger than her? I think I'm exaggerating. It was at
Yeah.
least 3 times her size.
Yeah. And it's, I have to say the design of the offspring itself, it just, they could have spent some more time on it. Honestly, the first thought I had was it looks like poor Belial from Basket Case got put on like one of those like ancient stretcher torture devices and just stretched out. I'm like,
Yeah, it was.
why? Why? And he should have had
Yeah.
some sort of rat-like feature too, because part of that serum had rodent DNA in it. So I would have thought he would have had like a cute little nose or beady little eyes or something.
Yes, it was like weird. Like, I'm with you. I'm like, this is just odd. I feel like they could have done something to blend them more, even maybe like, because the alien has that like elongated head. They could have done something so where the baby just had like an elongated head and more of like that like bug alien kind of
Mm-hmm.
body, and maybe the legs had like, who knows? But I'm with you. I'm like,
Yeah.
that was, felt like a disappointment. Like we get
Mm-hmm.
to the climax of the movie, I'm like, wait, now I'm distracted by this weird man thing.
Yeah. Well, and I would have rather the end that our original protagonist, die somehow. And the mother and the baby go in the pods. But if it would have been like a shape shifting type baby, so then it like has this appearance of being human. So like maybe at the end when they're going through space, you just hear this like horrific blood curdling like alien baby cry or something. That would have been cool too, but it just, there could have been so much more with that than there was.
I love that idea. As we're talking about like what the baby would have been better as.
Mhm.
Even look at Men in Black, the original,
Mhm.
right? This lady pops out that cute little
Oh
octopus big-eyed baby. I love your take on why can't the mom and baby escape, and maybe
yeah. Mhm.
this baby looks human enough but has like enough alien features so where she
Mhm.
could bond with it, because
Yeah.
that part was just weird. I get she's scared she had an alien baby and how
Mhm.
quickly they did that, because it feels like for a lot of people when they have children, they want to initially bond with it.
Yeah.
And we see that the baby's like, I want to bond with you. You're my mom, until she's so
Mhm.
horrified
Yeah.
by her baby that. So, what do you feel like they were trying to say? Having a woman give birth to a baby she found horrific. And
Mhm.
I'm going to guess this does happen. There are women that do give birth to disfigured
Mhm.
children. This felt like
Yeah.
monstrous. What do you think the intention was there, or did they have an intention?
I don't know, honestly. And I, when she was giving birth and then the baby came out initially, I was like, this is going to segue. They're going to remake Alienation. That was my immediate thought. I was like, okay, this is what's happening. But that wasn't it at all. I think maybe it was speaking to women's fear in terms of anything maternity related. Like, am I ever going to have children? If I do have children, or if I'm pregnant, is my child going to be quote unquote normal, whatever that is? What if there's something wrong with my child? What if, I can't handle it? Maybe those sorts of things, as well as just the fear of childbirth in and of itself. It's not a picnic. It's not what we usually see on TV. Um, and I think that could have been part of it as well. What do you think?
Oh, I agree with you. I love your take that, right, this exemplifies women's fear of pregnancy, motherhood. Are their children going to be born okay, healthy, all those things?
Mhm.
And still, where's the lack of the father? Because if we
Mhm.
go into horror movies, A Quiet Place,
Yeah.
that was his, I can't think of his name, Jim from The Office, his
Yeah.
fear of going into fatherhood. Like he's discussed, like this is where this movie came from.
Mhm.
So we see the dad's perspective. This movie robbed us from that. And I was going to ask you this in another cast, but I feel like it's coming up now because you haven't seen
Mhm.
Blink twice. I was going to ask you, do you feel that male perspective in certain films dominate that perspective, even if they're trying to say this is a woman's fear of childbirth? Because they're a man, they don't always get all the nuances of that fear.
I think for me, it's a two-part answer. So I think that the male perspective dominates an inaccurate female perspective. And I also think the male perspective, and we're talking about like masculine facing characters, is not fully explored. I think that it's very, you know, red or blue. There's really not anything in the middle. Um, and there are so many issues out there that we identify with, okay, well, feminine facing people deal with this all the time, masculine facing people don't. Um, I think it's very skewed in both ways, really. And I could say that too about the feminine facing perspective. I think that even when feminine facing persons try to translate things, we're still translating based on expectations from society and from media. We're not translating everything that we think about. And I always joke that at work, I'm like, we're sitting in the office talking, and probably any outside person is like, oh, they're probably just, swapping recipes or something. Whereas we're talking about like deep social issues. And, um, I think that could be true too of the masculine facing people I work with. And this could be any time that I've been employed that, we come in on a Monday and it's like, oh, did you catch the game over the weekend? Because that's what you expect masculine facing characters to say, when really maybe they're like, oh my goodness, did you see that this happened? And can you believe that such an incident occurred? What do you think we as a community should do about it? You know what I mean? So it's just like that set expectation for like, if you're masculine facing, you do these things. If you're feminine facing, you do these things.
Ooh, yes. And it feels like you are relating all of this to that, like in Romulus, the cultural narrative of
Mm-hmm.
the male perspective versus the female perspective. And that due to, right, like these expectations,
Mm-hmm.
people aren't always allowed to explore that, whether you're male facing or female facing. And I know you haven't seen Men yet. That feels like a movie where, who is it? Alex Garland, who did Annihilation, who it feels like he actually is breaking out of those cultural norms where he really is trying to get into the more female facing experience, the more
Mm-hmm.
female facing narrative. And in Men, he is challenging the fear of birth in towards the end of the movie. So I won't ruin it for you
Okay.
until you watch it. And so that's really interesting that we might have to do another cast if you watch Men to
Yeah.
compare these two different experiences of birth from the male perspective. And I even wonder if subconsciously there is, like, for men, because you said this is really bloody, like that
Mm-hmm.
fear, like something's coming out of a loved one's vagina.
Yeah.
It's bloody, it's gross.
Mm-hmm.
And what does it mean for this new creature to
Yeah.
now be in your world?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm all, we could probably talk forever because I'm curious about how actually, like, directors and writers, their subconscious actually feeds into their storytelling. I don't know if you've heard the Jeepers Creepers theory.
No, but I love Jeepers Creepers.
So the creator of the first and second one, he was arrested for, I believe he raped a 12-year-old boy.
What?
And so fans now are wondering if in those first two movies, the creature goes after men because it was actually the director subconscious not yet fully actualized,
Well,
or even his conscious mind working through his attraction towards men, which I thought was fascinating and also like heartbreaking, like that,
yeah.
because I love Jeepers Creepers, and when I heard that I was like,
I
this has
just don't.
hurt this movie
Yeah.
for me.
Yeah. See, I just. Oh no, I'm like.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same with like the actor that played the dad in Beetlejuice. When you find out, okay, and I don't want to go too much more into detail, but when you find out, sometimes when you find out the truth of someone, you have to remember they're not the character they play in a movie, or they, you know, they are an individual. So it's hard to not let it sour you on the movie or the show or the book or whatever it is. Um, yeah. So, oh,
And
I did not know that about the director
yeah,
Keepers Creepers.
no, it's like, it's devastating as we,
Yeah.
and listeners, viewers, we talk to cast back about legacy, and now Anna's
Mhm.
like, I feel like Anna in our discussion now is touching on how when somebody is congruent with who they are on screen, who they are as a person, then
Mhm.
there is this legacy that people really want to honor.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, she's talking, well, the guy in Beetlejuice, that actor, he's not dead. I don't know about Jeepers Creepers guy.
Mm-hmm.
it tarnishes the legacy, because then us as the viewers are wrestling with,
Yeah.
if I really like your work and you did these bad things, what does that mean about me? How do I
Mm-hmm.
process it? And then I feel like that's part of our processing. My question is, then we start to say, did who you are show up in your work? And we start to look for those clues, because we as people are very curious, unlike the aliens in Romulus that are like, no, I have a directive. This is
Yeah.
my directive. I need to do it. As humans, even
Mm-hmm.
in the movie, we are like, oh my gosh, what do I do about you? What do I do about this?
Yeah.
You're being a jerk because an android killed your mom, but I still care about you. I still
Mm-hmm.
want you to live.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree. And I do want to go back a little bit to the birthing scene in the movie. I was actually kind of pleased at how bloody it was, just because and anyone who's masculine facing, like, let us know what you thought when you saw that, because as feminine facing persons, or at least for me, I'm a cisgender female, so I'm used to seeing copious amounts of blood once every 28 days. Um, this is not anything new, and I think that really that's why body horror to me isn't as awful, because, like, my own body does horrific things every month. And you just kind of get used to it. So I feel like anyone who has kind of gone through the high estrogen experience probably was just like, oh yeah, that happens. Whereas someone who is not surrounded by that, or um, uncomfortable with the idea of that experience, may have been very grossed out by that scene.
Oh, yes, I am curious too. Like, it was a bloody, yeah, it
Mm-hmm.
was.
Yeah,
Baby and mama probably have some birth related trauma there.
yeah, I would say so. Oh my gosh, but I think it was pretty funny too that the ship was Romulus and Remus, which I didn't pick up on until I was watching the movie, and I was like, huh, interesting. And the whole idea of sustaining life in a non-traditional way, like if we go back to the story of Romulus and Remus and how they lived because they suckled the wolf's teat, um, that's not traditionally how human children, or demigod children, would sustain themselves. They, in most folklore and history, they would have to receive nourishment from their mother. So um I think that there's just some unspokenness, especially with the alien baby, in reference to the whole Romulus and Remus thing. I wish that the movie would have touched a little bit more on the mythology, because I think that would have been fun. Um, Also, just random question. So the rings that they're trying not to hit, are they on Saturn or just like some made up planet?
I
Because I
think
was,
it's some made up planet,
okay,
right? Because they're mining whatever
yeah,
planet
I was trying
that,
to figure it out,
yeah.
because I'm like, I think like the rings, I was like, well, they probably are closest to Saturn's, but I don't think it's actually Saturn. And then I got myself all like in a tizzy, so that makes way more sense. Okay.
I mean, it could be. I just thought it was the planet,
Yeah.
whatever mining planet that they were trying to escape. And I love that you bring up the mythology, and that would have been nice to have more of, right? Because the alien
Mhm.
movies really are about creation. How is life created? How is it
Mhm.
sustained? And even how do species coexist amongst ourselves and then with other species? Because we can see amongst the humans and the droids
Mhm.
that they're struggling to coexist.
Absolutely. Well, and now it's like, is there going to be another film called Remus? But um, the aliens too, they're just looking for any warm-blooded vessel to be filled, because we know that they've taken over cat, adult humans, child humans. So I feel like they're just looking for any warm-blooded host. Um, which to me is kind of like, because like most movies, when they involve like some sort of takeover of your body, it's very specific as to, okay, it has to be human or it has to be this type of human. So I do like that the aliens, they're just like, I just need warm blood. Like sometimes they like mistake a droid. They're like, oops, okay, not that one. Next host. It's just, I would like to maybe, and if they come out with another movie, learn more of the folklore about the aliens. Like, I want to know about them. I want to know what planet they're actually from. Like, why are they out here looking for hosts? Did they completely deplete their own resources? And um, I don't know. I'm really thinking about that.
Didn't they get into that in Prometheus? And I haven't seen Prometheus in a really
Yeah,
long time.
I need to
But isn't
rewatch.
that like into
They,
their origin?
I think they did. I guess it's not memorable. Um, maybe, maybe we need to rewatch
Yeah.
Prometheus and then talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, that was the original Alien when I originally saw
Mhm.
Prometheus.
Yeah.
But I don't, yeah, I think we
Yeah.
need to rewatch because maybe we
Yeah.
would get into it, but then maybe we just have more questions.
Yeah. Which would be good in either way. And then there's the whole like Alien versus Predator thing. Um, how did Predator find Alien? Why do they use them as target practice? You know, all these sorts of questions that I have as a super nerd here. Um,
Well, as a super nerd, right? Like, as like in the timeline, it's Prometheus, Covenant, Alien, Romulus, Aliens 2 and 3, right? Because I think I looked it up, and Romulus is
is
in between
mhm.
Alien and Aliens, right?
That's what it's supposed to be, but I find that really confusing because, well, Aliens is like supposed to be what, like 5 years later, because Ripley
There was something
in
weird
her,
in the timeline that I did
yeah,
not understand. So I was hoping you could clear it up because I was like, wait, what? Like between the two, I think what I
mhm.
read, it said like 50 years or something. Like, well, that doesn't make sense for Sigourney Weaver's
No,
character. And I was like, I'm just not understanding
yeah,
this.
because specifically in, I think it's Aliens where we find out she's in her early 40s. And the doctor is like, oh, well, you could still go back to your planet and get married and have a family. And I'm like, well, I think she was like in her mid 30s in Alien, like her character Ripley was. So it has to be about 5 years later. But in space, I guess time is so different. I don't
Viewers,
know. Anyone
listeners, if
who's,
you can answer our question,
yes,
please lay out this for us. Help us
yes,
to understand.
help us. If you are a diehard fan and you know more about the folklore and the mythology and all of those things, please, please, please let us know. Please tell us. You know, we're happy to relate these things to grief and change and life journeys, and that's our forte and area of expertise. But like any true horror and sci-fi fan, we have questions too about these movies, and that's what makes them so great. You know, our interpretation may not be yours, or it might be close to it, and that's what makes it so much fun. But any input that you might have would be very much appreciated and helpful as well.
Yes, please, please. Anna, who do you most relate to in Romulus?
Well, I actually, that's a really good question. I think I probably most relate to the droid that they find, which is like, I'm still
The
here.
droid from Alien. He's the
Yeah,
droid from Alien. Yeah.
yeah. Because it's like, I'm still here, kind of just waiting for something else to happen. I think that, you know, every ship has its crew member that that just goes down with the ship and is still there. And I think just I see a lot of that in my work ethic. Like, no matter what, man, I'm going to stay on that ship and try to help in the right way I can, or at least what I believe to be the right way. As much as I want to say the alien queen, I'm not her. I'm not. I wish I could be vicious like that, but that is just not my makeup. Mine is like, I will stay on the ship. I will try to help in any way that I can and just try and hope we achieve our goals. What about you, Margaret? What character do you most?
That's such a good answer. I guess sometimes I was like Kay because she's the mom and I relate, but not really because her whole trajectory. I guess Andy, Rain's
Yeah.
alien buddy, just
Yeah.
because I'm like there, I'm like, hey, let me tell you some cheesy jokes. Let me, even though you are much better at the jokes than me,
Yeah.
and I can be like him, like when I get focused, like, come on, like
Mhm.
this is what we need to do. Like, let's go. This doesn't make sense. Why are you doing it
Yeah.
that way? This is when I'm focused on a project. As a clinician, nobody, I didn't feel like I couldn't relate to anybody because nobody really brought that, except for maybe
Yeah.
Andy when he's like, hey, like, I'm
Mhm.
here, let me support you.
Yeah. That's Andy was very endearing. I enjoyed him. I think that the actor who portrayed him did a phenomenal job. He should get some sort of award. I think that he did just a wonderful, wonderful job. So props. But yeah, I think
Yes.
this particular movie, it was hard to find a character that was relatable. Because I think a lot of movies, there's one character or a scenario that just hits people, and it wasn't, it delivered. Like, you want to see aliens, you want to see weird stuff, you want to see what's going on this ship, and it delivered all of that. Um, there just wasn't, at least for me, there wasn't the opportunity for some sort of visceral connection to any of the characters.
And it feels like that's been a theme in a few of our past casts too, that there's just some movies that really lack the ability to give a likable character or a
Yeah.
character people relate to. That is what gets the audience invested in a movie,
Mm-hmm.
is when we feel for the character. We might not like the character, but when we
Yeah.
can connect and feel, or we're like, okay, I can relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I was like, none of these characters, they're
There.
okay. But I was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, they're there
Mm-hmm.
because they're there because they have to tell the story about the alien.
Yeah.
So I feel like you're like spot on. This is a story about the alien, and we just need
Mm-hmm.
some humans in here to tell this story.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. Well, if you yourself are starting to feel alien in some nature, meaning that you don't fit in or you're out of place or you're processing things maybe in a way that's not too great or sort of detrimental to yourself or those around you, always remember that there are supports out there. There are local supports, there are supports online, there are services available to you to kind of get your processing database back where it needs to be. We don't want you to pull an Andy and have the wrong chip card for your processing. We want you to be doing things in a healthy way. Um, and that's very important. So, you can feel like Andy before the chip, not after.
Yes.
And without kind of using this analogy, if you are struggling, there are so many resources out there. Depending on your situation, you can certainly contact Rain or 988. There's so many different services out there. Your local mental health association will also be very helpful in their support services.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. Rain 988, the Trevor Project, right? Love on Her Arms, all great agencies to give you support so that you are not alone. And also, Andy, you touch on how he brings in humor, because humor can often help alleviate stress and help lighten the loads that we carry.
Definitely make sure you laugh today. If there's one thing you take away from this
Yeah.
podcast, make sure you laugh, because that is
Yes.
medicine, as Margaret said. All right.
Yes.
Well, I have to go rewatch Prometheus now. And see if I learned anything that I forgot.
Yes.
So that was
Yes.
the new
Me too.
assignment. All right. Well, until next time, everybody creep back into the coffin. Make sure you stay scary, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, follow, all the good stuff. See you next time.